Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Tommy Brzee. It is Tuesday, April 23rd, and we have a great show for you today. We are going to be focusing a lot on the NFL Draft today. Obviously, the draft week just started. We're about a little over 48 hours away from the first name being called, so today I wanted to start with going through my position rankings. I'll first go through all the offensive positions, and then go through all the defensive. So Top 10 Tuesday, we will have a ton of top 10s today. But then after we get through all the rankings of all the players in the draft, we will get to some spring game takeaways. We weren't quite able to finish up with all the games that happened on Saturday yesterday, so I wanted to get to USC, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Texas A&M today, and then we'll finish it up with a Top 10 Tuesday, and I will give you my favorite players in this draft, my favorite prospects, kind of just guys that I really like the way they play, or I think they're going to be incredible at the next level, what have you. So I'll break that down at the end of the show, but before we jump into everything, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question or comment on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to have your question on the screen, puts you at the top of the list, and we get to have fun back and forth here. But let's jump in and let's start talking about the offensive side of the ball for these rankings, because there are so many incredible positions in this draft, but it feels like the two that really stand out above the pack are offensive line, particularly offensive tackle, and wide receiver. So we're going to jump into both of those, and I have the offensive rankings right here. So tons to break down in this. I did include offensive line kind of as a whole position group. Obviously, there's interior and offensive tackles, but just to make the list even on either side of the ball, figured I would just group offensive line together, but we're going to see a lot of offensive tackles. So it all starts with Joe Alt, in my opinion, and I think in pretty much everyone's opinion. The dude's an athletic freak. He's so rangy, so his ability to pretty much play wherever you need him to on the line is really remarkable. I think he is a slam dunk top 10 pick. I would be very surprised, honestly, if he made it past number 7 at the Titans. So I think this is obviously the number one offensive tackle, the obvious number one offensive lineman, and I think we'll continue to hear that throughout this process, and I'm sure we will hear his name first when it comes to offensive lineman in this draft. And then I have J.C. Latham, the Bama right tackle. I think this is a kid that definitely had some tough moments, definitely in that Michigan game, on that final play, got blown up a little bit, but it definitely has elite size, elite athletic ability, and definitely is someone that I think if the Chargers do end up trading down, which I expect them to do with the Vikings, I think this is a guy that could definitely go at that 11 spot to the Chargers, because they need as much protection for Justin Herbert as possible. But then we get into some other guys. We got Olu Fashanu is a guy that just held down that spot at Penn State last year, was a huge piece for that offensive line. You have Talise Fuaga, who might be the most athletic guy in this entire group. He's just remarkable at offensive tackle for Oregon State last year. Trof Fautanu is another guy that is just remarkable. The ability is just insane. He can play tackle if you need him to, but definitely is more of a guard. Can just absolutely overpower people whenever you really need him to. Amarius Mims is kind of a toss-up, a ton of athletic ability on this kid, but definitely had some injury trouble. There's definitely some worries around him, but I think he's definitely going in the first round, partly because so many people need an offensive tackle, and when a guy's 6'8" and 350, it's hard to pass up on that guy. So Amarius Mims, I do expect to go in the first round. Jackson Powers Johnson is someone I've seen kind of fall lately. I think Graham Barton has been getting some love at that center position for being the number one center off the board, but as far as I can see, Jackson Powers Johnson is comfortably the best center in this class. I think Graham Barton is incredible, don't get me wrong, but I just think Jackson Powers Johnson had a remarkable year at Oregon. I think he's someone that can be a starter right from the get-go, and you see teams like the Eagles, you see a ton of other teams really that need that interior line help. So I think Jackson Powers Johnson is someone definitely to watch at that position. Then you have Tyler Guyton. He's someone that is definitely really remarkable. I think in these offensive tackles, I definitely could have flipped him with Amarius Mims. I think he's someone that will go later in the first round, but at the end of the day will be very, very good for whatever team he goes to. I've seen him time and again going to the Cowboys at 24, so would not be surprised there. Then I have Connor Beebe, who's someone who is a little bit lower on boards for most people than it is for me. I think this is a guy that was just remarkable for Kansas State and kind of was that linchpin for that offensive line, at least for that 3-year stretch that he was just so dominant in the Big 12. So a little bit undersized, but definitely a guy that has tons of ability and will be working his butt off to be incredible at the next level. And then I finish it out with Jordan Morgan, another guy that could sneak into the first round, along with Roger Rosengarter from Washington, two guys that I find are sitting somewhere around the 30 mark in the first round. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone snaps them up. But let's keep it moving here because we got a ton of names to get through. Tight ends, the number one is easy. It's Brock Bowers. I think he is one of, if not the best straight-up prospect in this class. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is right up there with him, but this dude is just remarkable. His athletic ability is off the charts, obviously. He does stuff that I've never seen be done by a tight end. Obviously, the blocking is a worry. The overall size is definitely a worry, but I think when you put this guy in the right situation and put the ball in his hands, good things happen. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Then I have Ja'Tavion Sanders, and I totally get he kind of has the same issue of Brock Bowers, where the blocking is not necessarily where you want it to be, but elite pass catcher, a guy that will totally transform your offense and definitely make you a for real offensive team, especially from that tight end position. So probably won't be going to one of those teams that has a very good pass catching tight end already, but if you have a dirty work guy, as it were, and then you need someone to kind of polish it off in the pass catching game, I think Ja'Tavion Sanders is a great choice there. Ben Sinnott is Kyle Juszczyk to me. He reminds me so much of that guy. I think he's a remarkable H-back. I think he's someone that you can line up all over the field, and he'll do literally whatever you ask him to do. So really like that kid. Think he's really talented and maybe a little bit undervalued, to be totally honest. Dallin Holker is a guy out of Colorado State that made that remarkable play in the combine where he caught two passes in. He caught one pass, held on to it, and then caught one with his other hand on the gauntlet, which was just weird athleticism that I did not expect to see during the combine. But he's really remarkable. He's a guy that I think kind of has that Sam Laporta type vibe to me. I think he's going to be definitely someone that you can pick up a little bit later in the draft, but could have a huge effect in his rookie year. Then you have Theo Johnson, just an athletic freak. Cade Stover is a guy that has been consistent as can be when he was at Ohio State, can do a ton of different things offensively. So I think teams would definitely fall in love with him. Jaheim Bell, kind of the same thing as Theo Johnson or Ja'Tavion Sanders, honestly. A elite pass catcher, not necessarily the biggest guy in the world, but definitely can add something to your offense. Tip Riemann is a guy from Illinois that is just as consistent as it comes. I think he's a fantastic blocker among this group that struggles a little bit. I mean, you have Ben Sinnott, you have Dallin Holker, but in terms of elite blockers, you don't have necessarily a ton to choose from, but these two guys, Tip Riemann and A.J. Barner from Michigan, are very, very good at that point, and that's just because, Big Ten football, you absolutely have to be, pretty much, if you want to get recruited. And then I have Devin Culp at 10, and that's someone that is a little bit off the radar for most people, but I think his athletic ability is just insane, and I think he's definitely worth taking a flyer on later in the draft just to get that athletic ability on your team, to be totally honest with you. Then we get to the group that was by far the hardest to rank in the wide receivers, and I left a name off here that I'll get to here in a second that I probably should have put on, to be totally honest, but Marvin Harrison Jr. sets it off. He is the most NFL-ready, maybe prospect in this entire draft. Just remarkable. Definitely probably didn't help his case necessarily throughout the draft process, not working out and stuff, but I don't necessarily think he did too much to hurt his case by any means. I think he will go forward to the Cardinals, and they will be very happy they made that decision. Then I have Malik Neighbors. I did have Rome Odunze early on in this process as my number 2 wide receiver. I've kind of changed tunes on that. I think Malik Neighbors' ability to separate, I think his athletic ability and kind of just lining him up wherever you want on the field just makes him a little bit more of a factor than Rome Odunze will be, at least in his early years in the NFL. But then I have Brian Thomas at 4. I think in terms of athletic ability, he might just be second to only Marvin Harrison Jr. in this group. He's just remarkable. Someone that can absolutely change the game for you. Very tall, very fast, just really incredible. Incredible player that I think could become a elite NFL receiver, to be totally honest with you. Then you get into the group that is really hard to rank. You have A.D. Mitchell, I have at 5. I think his athletic ability, much like Brian Thomas, is just too good to pass up. I think you have Xavier Worthy at 6, someone that can totally change the complexion of a game just when you put the ball in his hands. And then I have Ladd McConkey at 7. I think this is one of the most overlooked players in this entire draft. I think wherever he is taken, he is going to make his team very, very happy. He's just a remarkable kid. I think his route running is honestly as good as anyone in this draft, maybe better than everyone else in this draft. So I think he's someone that no matter where you get him, you're getting a receiver that is going to show up every day, is going to give you a lot of good reps, and pretty much catch everything that comes his way. So huge fan of Ladd McConkey. I think he's going to make a huge difference at the next level. Then I have Troy Franklin at 8. I think he's someone that is a little bit undervalued in this whole craziness that is the wide receiver class. I think he's someone that can be a huge difference maker, kind of a weird hybrid almost between Ladd McConkey and Xavier Worthy, where you have the speed, you have the elite ability, but that route running is not a slouch by any means. So very excited for this kid. I think it's going to take him some time and might be more of a gadget guy early on, but definitely has the ability to become a very good wide receiver at the next level. This is probably where I made a mistake, honestly. I probably would have put Ricky Pearsall in here at the 9 spot over Leggett and then move everyone down 1 spot. But to be at the end of the day, these two guys are just remarkable, and Xavier Leggett and Malachi Corley. I think both of these guys are very different receivers, to be totally honest. Malachi Corley is a little bit more of a polished kind of a slot receiver mainly, and then you have Xavier Leggett, which is just an athletic freak, remarkably fast, incredibly strong, just one of those guys that absolutely jumps off the page when you see him play. So I think Ricky Pearsall, these three in general, or really the back 5 of this list, are really bunched together very closely, and there's guys off this list that I will talk about later that are just remarkable. So this wide receiver class is pretty much as deep as I've ever seen it. But let's move on to the backfield. Let's start with the running backs. I do have Jonathan Brooks as my top running back in this class. I think he's the most complete of the group. I think other guys have some attributes that are just remarkable, but I think Jonathan Brooks, from a pass catching standpoint, from hitting the whole vision, all of the things that you need, he doesn't necessarily, jump off the page in any one specific factor, but I do think he does everything remarkably well. So I think he will be the first running back off the board. Then I have Trey Benson, who I think is a remarkably good player, can pass catch, can do a ton of really, really good things on the offensive side of the ball. Jalen Wright has just outright speed. I don't think I need to worry about him too much. He's just get the ball in his hands and let him work, kind of a oh my gosh, the Texas A&M running back. Why am I blanking on his name? Devin Achane, excuse me. Definitely someone that can just change a game the second you put it in his hands. Braylon Allen definitely does struggle catching the ball out of the backfield. That's my biggest worry for him. But if you're a team that just wants to run the ball over and over and over again, I wouldn't necessarily fault you at all if taking Braylon Allen. I think he's someone that can be that down in, down out back, and maybe you'll, utilize his ability pretty early on in his career, but at the end of the day, he's someone that if you're not going to get the greatest pass catching in the world out of him, he can run between the tackles with the best. He might be the best in between the tackle runner in this entire class. So really like him. I think Bucky Irving is one of the most complete of this group. I think him catching the ball out of the backfield is an absolute weapon for whatever team he's drafted to. Would definitely want him next to a established running back, maybe like a Derrick Henry or someone that's a little bit more of a traditional running back. But if you can utilize this kid the right way, he's just going to be incredible at the next level. Then I have Blake Corum. I think he's someone that you got into the draft process and you almost expected him to be the number 1 running back, right? The remarkable things he did at Michigan felt like he was going to be the guy, but not necessarily the greatest pass catcher, a little bit undersized, so definitely some question marks around him, but we know what the dude's about. He absolutely loves football. I know he's going to put forth his best effort every single Sunday, so I think he's someone that no matter where he goes, I think he will play a part in whatever teams he's on. Audric Estime is a guy that's kind of the same type of vibe. I think he has a ton of ability. I think the pass catching leaves a little bit to be desired, to be totally honest, but definitely has between the tackle ability and is someone that could definitely make a team very, very happy in that short yardage situation. Marshawn Lloyd is a guy that I think is super athletic. He's someone that I think right now you're kind of working with a little bit of a project, but if you can make it happen and you can get the most out of him, he could be an elite running back at the next level. I think he never quite hit his full stride in college, was at USC, then to South Carolina, so had some bouncing around happening during his career. I think once he gets to set his feet and really figure out an offense, I think he could just be remarkable. Kamani Vidal is a guy from Troy that really showed up during the combine, was someone that tested off the charts, and very, very excited to see what he can do at the next level. And then Will Shipley. I think he's someone that his pass catching ability speaks for itself. There's something about him with the ball in his hands in open field that is just special. So I think he's someone that, along with kind of a Bucky Irving character, where you like him next to a very established, more traditional running back, but get him the ball in weird situations or get him the ball in screens, and he'll make stuff happen for you, that's for sure. But finally, let's get to the position everyone's been waiting on in quarterback. And the top three guys here will be the top three guys off the board in my mind. I think Caleb Williams is the best quarterback prospect, although I do not think there is this massive gap between him and Jaden Daniels. I think is actually very, very slim. I think there's actually a bigger gap between Jaden Daniels and Drake May. Although I really like Drake May and he is that prototypical pro quarterback that you kind of build in a lab, I think he does make some head scratching plays where you're gonna want him to possibly sit a year, possibly learn the offense a little bit before you throw him to the Wolves, but he might just be thrown to the Wolves because I think he's going to get drafted number 3 overall to the Patriots, and I think he'll be their starter. I worry that he's going to take a little bit longer to get up to speed. Then I have J.J. McCarthy. I think he's a guy that a lot of people have a lot of opinions on. Some think he shouldn't be drafted even in the first 2 rounds. Some think he should be the second quarterback off the board. I tend to be kind of in that group that I think he has all the tools. I think he has a ton of stuff that you can look at and say that's really, really good. But there's just not a ton of that, right? There's not a ton of volume. There's not a ton of ability to say, okay, I know he can do that every single play for, a 12 play drive. He can execute an offense. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to, the elite stuff that you see in flashes, if you can see it more consistently, you feel much more confident in him. But I definitely think he's someone that I think he'll go number 5 to the Vikings. I think they'll trade up and grab him. And when they do that, I think he's being drafted into the best situation of this group. So I think he could definitely succeed, but it's going to take him some time, I think, to be comfortable taking full reins of a offense, to be totally honest with you. Then I kind of get a little contrarian here. I think Bo Nix is just a better prospect than Michael Penix. I think his athletic ability gives him a higher floor, a higher upside as well. I think Michael Penix, the injury history worries me a little bit. I think his throwing motion is a little bit long for me. There's definitely some things in there that just put him at a little bit more risk than Bo Nix would. I don't think necessarily either of those guys are long-term starters in the NFL, but definitely can be guys that could spot start for you or be really good backups in the future. And then you get kind of the later rounds. I have Michael Pratt at 7, Spencer Rattler 8, Carter Bradley from South Alabama at 9, and then Jordan Travis to round out the list. So a group of quarterbacks that are kind of confusing to peg. I think Caleb Williams is comfortably number 1 pick. I think you can pretty much pen that in right now. But at the end of the day, I think Jaden Daniels is someone that is an absolute game changer. He's someone that I think if you draft him, and if for some reason, it's not going to happen, but if for some reason the Bears were to draft Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, I might be one of the few people in the world that does not mind that decision at all. So it'll be really interesting to see this class develop. I think there's a lot of talent in this class. I worry that there's not too many sure things in this class. Maybe zero sure things in this class, to be totally honest with you. But I think when you look at Caleb Williams, the ability is impossible to deny. And then Jaden Daniels is just remarkable. And then everyone else, I have a pretty big question mark next to their name, I'll be honest. But that will do it for the offensive rankings. I know that's a ton of names to get to. just wanted to give you guys an idea of where I stand on all these positions. But we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we'll get to the defense. We'll do the same thing we just did. We'll break down everything from defensive tackle to edge to corners, and we will do every position top 10 and give you guys an idea of where the defense sits. So stick with us, and we will be right back with that.